Hi, my name is Kezia. I'm a stroke survivor and a member of BIND.
And hi, I'm Carrie, a stroke survivor and a member of BIND as well. And today we're welcoming Gregg Grossman, who has his Ph.D., a CBLC, and an LBC. And you know, we like to say all those letters like we know what they are. I know what the first one is, but and he's also the president of Beyond Perseverance. He describes himself as an experienced professional with a zeal to succeed in life. He holds dual certifications as a biblical life coach and a life breakthrough coach. He is also a published author of Times of Perseverance, Hope and Healing on the Battlefields of Life. So welcome, Gregg.
Hey, good morning. Welcome.
Welcome to Bindwaves, the official podcast of the Brain Injury Network of Dallas. I'm Brian White, BIND's Executive Director. On each episode, we'll be providing insight into the brain injury community. We'll be talking to members and professionals regarding their stories and the important role of BIND's Clubhouse. We work as a team to inspire hope, community, and a sense of purpose to survivors, caregivers, and the public. Thank you for tuning into Bindwaves. Let's get on with the show.
So, since I mentioned your book, why don't you start with that? Tell us a little bit about your book.
Sure. My book is a compelling narrative chronicling my survival from personal and family traumatic brain injury. My brother was severely brain injured. I've been brain injured. And my book talks about that whole process of what I experienced.
Yeah, I think it's great that you mentioned that your brother and you are also a brain injury survivor. Can you tell us a little bit about that, if you feel comfortable for doing that?
Sure. Yeah. Let me give you just a brief overview. My brother was in a head-on collision in the late 80s, and he was traveling in a car, and there was inclement weather, and it's a miracle he survived because and a few not far behind him there was a doctor and his nurse, and they did a roadside tracheotomy and saved his life.
Oh wow!
It was a miracle. He was a good Samaritan, of course, and so my brother was severely brain injured. Was in the hospital for many months, and then went to a brain injury rehab hospital for a long time, and then transitioned to a halfway house and lived on his own. During that time, fast forward so many years to 1992, I was hit by a car while jogging, and I was jogging not in the right place. I should have been jogging with traffic to see me, and they were behind me, and so I made a mistake and did that, and was hit and shattered. My left leg was shattered in two places. The bone and the ankle was shattered in two places, and my head was slammed up against the car, the windshield, and I sustained a lot of. It was open, wound there, but I had a traumatic brain injury from that as a result of that, and spent some time in the hospital in ICU, and then went to a rehab hospital for about a month, and survived that. But then a number of years later, in 2011, I had another car accident. I had a car accident, and at this time, because of the head injuries that I had in my life, I had developed post-concussion syndrome. Okay. And so I developed vertigo and depression and intense sensitivity to sound. Saw a neurologist and ran into some debilitating symptoms and recovered from that. But along the way, towards the tail end of it, I said to my wife, I'm going to write about this. I don't know when or how, but I'm going to go do it. And sure enough, I did just that. And through the process of time, I was able to write this book to provide hope, encouragement, inspiration to the brain injured and their families, and also to all people who are wounded in society.
Well, there you go. You fit right in with this. Mm-hmm. So that brings up another question, I guess, that I hadn't really thought about. So were you already on your road to life coaching before your brain injury, or did that all happen after the brain injury?
Yes, that happened after the brain injury. Yeah, many years afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so the question I had when I realized that you and your brother both had a brain injury and you were doing life coaching, I didn't even think to put two and two together that maybe the brain injury is what led you down that path. But do you think that because of your experience, both personally and with your brother, that allows you to be more empathetic as a coaching person?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. I would say my ability to be, I'm also a hospice chaplain and I've been a workplace chaplain, but as a life coach, with my dual certifications, all the experiences that I've been through, and you don't see it when you're going through it, but when you go through a severe traumatic brain injury with a family member and you're going through your own brain injury, and you know, it really makes you sensitive to hurting people,
sure.
You know, to the wounded people. And so it's given me an appreciation for, a deep appreciation for the human and spiritual condition. And I've been able now to get a little additional training and some experience. And so it helps me in my work.
Yeah. And I think that, like, just so you know, that our part of our podcast is also to, like, encourage the members and other brain injury survivors to have questions for you, right? So one of the questions was definitely, like, as a life coach and as a counselor, can you explain the differences that you have had, like, between a life coach and a counselor?
Yeah, sure. And I'm a spiritual counselor. That would be connected to being a hospice chaplain and a life coach. Yes, let me explain the difference. Let me tell you what a hospice what a life coach is and what it isn't.
Yes.
That's the best way to start that, so you both understand and our audience understands. A life coach is not a psychotherapist. A life coach is not an LPC or a psychologist. Those are people who are trained to work with past trauma, past emotional trauma, and a lot of times it's psychopathology. There, people are depressed. There may be some other issues going on, and so they're trained to work with people who have been, deeply wounded in that area, and are working through trials with that, associated with that, is affecting their life. What a life coach is, that's what a life coach is. And what a life coach is, it takes people from where they're at and helps them get to where they're at to where they want to be. That's on the life breakthrough side. That's a side that does not emphasize God or his view of the human condition. It has a change model, and it's geared towards the secular population. But it helps people get to where they're at, to where they want to be. The other side is a biblical framework. It's a Christ-centered framework. It takes people where they are and to where God wants them to be, and it utilizes the biblical framework, the Scripture, as doing just that.
Okay, thank you. I think it's important for us to fully understand that. Like I said, these are questions that we receive because we make sure to let our members know, like a Brain Injury Network, that we have you as a guest, right? So these are just, like, interesting. Like, what can we learn more about him? So thank you so much for sharing the differences. It's really important for us.
Because, I think a lot of us, as being in the brain injury world, we understand counseling because we get counseling in our recovery process, in our inpatient, if we get to go to day neuro, if we get to go to a PATE or a CNS or somewhere like that, you get all of that counseling. And so we know, we understand LPC and all that, but life coaching is a little bit different. But I get what you're saying. So it's like, okay, I'm through with my therapy, my inpatient, my outpatient, I guess you have it, and I'm not really in that place where I think I need personal counseling to deal with my emotions anymore. I'm like, I know that I can still be 100% person, but I have this disability. Now I'm going to come get some life coaching so you can help me realize my goals and how I am still 100% person, even with my disability, that I can still achieve those goals and how to achieve those goals. Am I getting that right? Just to kind of, in my brain injured world, trying to break it down.
No, that was a great description. It's meeting people where they're at. And by the way, I do that as a hospice chaplain in a workplace chaplain, marketplace chaplains. I've been with them a number of years. You're meeting with employees at the workplace, or you're meeting them all where they're at. It's the same thing as a hospice chaplain. It's a different circumstance. I'm working with the terminally ill, but I'm meeting them all where they're at. And as a life coach, whether it's on the life breakthrough side or the biblical life coaching side, meeting all people where they're at. And just so you know, coaching is 80% listening, 20% talking, maybe a little bit more listening, but it's majority listening, and it's asking open-ended questions, and it's not telling people what to do. So by virtue of there, I am helping the client or the person I'm coaching, the coachee, by listening and reflecting back to them what they're saying, and then getting them to challenging their thinking and getting them to think for themselves, to keep their agency of who they are, to be able to think through things for themselves.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Yeah, and I actually, right now you mentioned a little bit about it, but why do you think that what you do, or actually why do you think members or brain injury survivors or the people that you work with are engaged with you? Like, why do you think that happens?
I think I think the first thing is when you're working with anybody, really you're wanting to develop trust. They need to feel as though they could trust you and talk to you. And so I remember I went to a meeting somewhere, and I spoke to one of the people who had worked at this place where there was a networking group, and they told me they really appreciated my heart and my spirit, and sure enough, that person became a client. So they saw something from me, and so let me go back and say that that's so important that I have to be able. People have to understand that that I care. The best thing I can give people is to listen and genuinely care about their life. And I wrote that in my book, and I live that out every day. And it's doing that, listening and genuinely caring. And then there needs to be some chemistry too.
Sure.
People have to feel as though they could, and that takes time. It takes for both people, even for the coach, because we're all human. It takes time to get to know people, but it starts with that, and then it just moves forward as we develop that, rapport, to get to know each other.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Coach. Yeah.
So I know that was kind of one of the questions we had, but I'm going to try to rephrase it a little bit differently. We're talking a lot to you about brain injury because that's us, that's our audience, that's who we are. But I'm going to guess that not all your patients are disabled. Would you say it's like do you work with very many disabled, or do you actually tend to work with more able-bodied?
I'm not presently working with any brain injury, but I'm able to do that. I'm certainly working, with other people who, like I said, as a hospice chaplain and as a workplace chaplain. But no, I'm not working with any, but I would be able to because of my understanding and background. Being an experienced survivor myself, I'd be able to, understand a lot better and be more of an effective coach and listener, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think that. I'm going to take a quick pause just to remind that our listeners make sure to continue connecting on Thursdays and continue just checking into your favorite platform, and just make sure to follow us, click all those like buttons, and just keep connecting with us. Okay, so I had a question too. So with the people that you work with, what are some challenges that you have experience with your clients, the people that you're connecting with?
I would say, well, there's either internal or external barriers, and barriers come in different shapes and sizes. But lots of people have challenges. That's a better word. With time management.
Yeah.
With setting boundaries within themselves and within people, within their relationships. The interpersonal component is pivotal. That's the lifeblood of the organization, the lifeblood of the world. So they're having challenges with that. And they're just stuck, they're in what we call a cycle, where they're doing the same thing over and over and over again. If you do the same, they're doing the same thing over. But learned behavior could be unlearned. You can break that cycle, but you need someone to listen and to guide you. And it's hence my guided change for the future is I'm taking people where they're at, and I'm helping them work through the time management. One person I work with, I helped them get a daily planner, and it helped them greatly. Got some good feedback on that. So there's a number of little things. But again, if it starts, invariably, things may come in there, about their relationships, and I still can talk with them about that. But again, I also have to keep my radars up to listen. Could this person best be served with a counselor? Depending on what and again, I don't make any rash judgments. I just really like to listen. But by and large, coaching meets all people where they're at, and certainly if someone is disabled or neurologically impaired, that's okay, as long as they're able to work with me and they feel comfortable working with me. And if they're working with a counselor, and that's sometimes a question I may ask on the questionnaire, are you working with someone now, or is it something and I need to understand so I could best be of some service. But it's very important to be able to talk to people and to understand where they're at. And then I always ask people, how can I be of help? What brings you to coaching? What would you like to work on?
Right.
And then I help them narrow that down. Some people come on the laundry list, but usually it narrows down to several things.
Sure.
Look, if you're having trouble doing something, then you do it. You feel better. So the emotions are involved. But that's what I normally like to do. Those are the people that I kind of see. It's kind of a plethora of a lot of different things. But when people have challenges with relationships, it usually goes down to boundary issues. They have trouble setting boundaries within themselves or with someone else, and they don't know how to do that. And so I'm able to help them, to guide them in that respect to make some changes.
Right. And I think that setting boundaries, and like even what you just said at first is just establishing like your time is so difficult. It's something I had to learn even before the stroke and even after, like how much time do you have available and what's actually like possible to do, right? And then setting boundaries as to like, when can I say that I have this much time available, and being able and making it easier to say no is so difficult. And I think that's something that you can relate to regardless if you have a brain injury or not, right? So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for sharing what you just shared about a lot of people have trouble saying no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so when I help people understand and help them to learn is, it's okay if you can't do it. And once you give yourself permission, then you can tell the other person, Kezia, I really appreciate your asking me to take on some extra work. I would love to help you do that. I'm a little overextended right now, and I'm not able to do that, but I'm hoping in the future to do it. So again, you have to be able to first give yourself permission, and then you can respond back so the other person is heard, so they know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does.
Definitely.
And so because we realize, okay, so if we stop saying no, well, how do we, and there's that interpersonal component. So it's learning how to be proactive, not be reactive.
Right. And we're working on that.
Yeah.
Now, one of the questions, as we said, we ask our members for questions that they had that I'm going to, again, reword it a little bit differently, but I think you, as a brain injury survivor, could probably help us since you have the experience that we have and your coach lifing experience. But what are maybe some ways, I'm going to try to do it, that brain injured survivors look at as like a negative that you could help spin in a positive? So like in the beginning, I was very negative because my left side didn't work. I was very, down and out. I have since on my own been able to turn that into a positive and go, so my arm doesn't work like it's supposed to. I'm still working on it. I'm trying to get better. I'm doing the best I can with it, but I'm not going to let that affect the other 90% of my life. I mean, do you ever come across things like that with people that they see this thing as a very negative thing and it's really not that negative? And how do we twist that to positive?
That's a great question, and yes, I do deal with that, and I've had dealt with that as a brain injury survivor, and deal with that with my coaching clients. We're talking about reframing. Let's talk about that. Reframing is changing the way you see things and the way you believe things. So we all have values. Okay, first it goes back to our value system, but reframing goes down to basically catching your thoughts first. You got to do thought stopping. There's a little, mental work here. You have to say, stop yourself, and if you need to picture a stop sign, you do that. And then once you do that, you're not quite done yet. When you're in your car and you're at the stop sign, you stop, and you still have to stop, and then you're looking for cars, but then you have to take your foot off the accelerator and go move the car. So reframing is now that you've stopped that thought of being negative, it's looking at your situation differently, and it's saying, I've got this injury, and it's caused some challenges, and I've really worked really hard, but I'm going to move beyond this, and there's some things I can't do, and I'm aware of the limitations, but it does not define who I am. I can do so much more with who I am and what I have to offer people. So now you see how you're turning that around, and you're saying that to yourself. And so if you don't catch yourself and the negativity begins as a little bit of a, you take a little snow and then you take a little bit more snow and then you roll that snowball and it becomes a big snowball. And so you have to sort of catch that in the beginning. So I get my clients to reframe, to look at things differently. And if you have to write it down first, that's good to get a double column piece of paper, write down, negative thoughts, positive thoughts. Sometimes they're automatic thoughts. They come without. And so you write down that thought. And then on the other side, if you have a negative, I'm never going to be able to do anything. I can't do anything with my arm anymore. Then you write that on the left side. On the right side, the positive, you write, I've had some challenges with this, and I've worked very hard to get better, but it doesn't define me. I'm going to be able to move beyond this. So now you're telling yourself, you're seeing things from a different point, but you're sort of challenging that, what they say, that internal critic. Dr. David Burns said that. He said that in his New Mood Therapy book. He was a cognitive behavioral clinician many, many years ago. I read that book during my first brain injury, and it really helped me a lot to really challenge that internal critic. But once you challenge it, then you got to, talk, be positive to yourself,
right,
and endorse yourself. And that takes work, and that's a process, but it's the reframing. It's going back and getting people to challenge that negativity. And there's a lot of ways to do that. The double column technique is a good way, and then it's getting them to reframe it, look at it, say it differently to themselves. And when you say something to yourself, you hear yourself, and then you begin to, if you say it long enough, and you begin to believe it, and then you begin to sort of quell out that negativity where the positivity takes over. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. I think that I think that's definitely something that many people can also relate to, right? Like you just went through a very negative experience. I mean, it was traumatic, like like a lot of members and a lot of brain injury survivors had to have, right? It wasn't our choice to go through this experience, but then we flip it to make it seem like a positive outcome, right? Like for me, the way that I look at it is like I had to restart my life and it was terrible. But now I do a podcast. Like I wouldn't have doing a podcast if that didn't happen to me. So I'm going through this great experience, right? And then like in regards to you, like what gives you the hope and the motivation to continue? And like how do you relate that with the people that you work with? Like how do you do that?
Sure. I think that what's helped me, first, just to let the viewers know that I work with it. When my brother was severely brain injured, I sought out some counseling at university, and it helped me immensely. And then when we had the COVID outbreak, that was a very difficult time for a lot of people. People got isolated. Long story short, my mother got COVID unexpectedly, and then 4 days later, my father-in-law passed away. And it was really in the course of that time, I had my book, my manuscript was due, and I got an extension from my publisher. They were so loving and supportive. But I wrote a postscript on surviving the grief with my mother, and so I ended up working with a grief counselor, and my counselor has really taught me a lot. Still work with this person, and they have helped me to be able to look beyond my situation. They have helped me to understand that the real healing comes from within, and that it's going to take time, and that God is control. He has a plan, and it's perfect, but I have to be patient. And the patient part is the hardest thing.
Oh, absolutely. And don't ever ask for patience. I know that one.
That we don't want to be patient. It's just within our nature. The human part, as my counsel said, the human part gets in the way. But really, in a sense, it's hard to trust an unseen or an unheard thing, but we have to do it by faith.
Yeah.
We have to do it by faith. And so that's what's helped me is I've been able to look beyond my situation. My situation from my accident was I had my leg was shattered, but it healed. I had hardware in it. I had it removed because I had a piece of the hardware coming out. So a year later, they took it out. Went to see an orthopedic doctor. He says, I hope you could run. So I got a brace. I was running on and off throughout the years. I got a number of braces to do that until about a year or so ago, I got really bad pain, and I knew I needed to go see the doctor. So I got a couple of consults, and they basically told me never run again. And I couldn't accept that, I really couldn't accept I couldn't run. I figured everything I had survived and gone through, because we all endure injuries. So I went to see a top prominent sports medicine ankle orthopedic surgeon here in Dallas, and he said, if you continue to run, you're going to have pain, and you're going to also further damage the joint surface. So I didn't want to end up having my ankle seized and have it,
Sure.
problems. So I had to make a change. And what I did was I said, I can cycle. And I did. And so now I'm considering training for master cycling races. So cool. I took a situation that was,
there's your negative and you turned it into a positive.
Exactly. And so, but we don't see it, as my counselor has taught me, and this is very important here for us all, as brain injury survivors, or we're trying to go through the dark times of the valley with a brain injury. We don't see it when we're going through it.
Exactly.
God does. God sees the beginning and the end, but it's only when you get through it where you could look back, Kenzie, as you have now. You're saying, now you're looking back on what you've gone through. Now you're seeing, you're doing a podcast, you're a host, but we have to sort of just know that we will progress and get better, but we don't know when that will be or how it will be, because we want to know. And there are some things we just have to accept that we can't know. And so we step back in faith, we let God work, we work with the people around us, and we take not just one day at a time, sometimes we have to take an hour at a time.
Sure.
Sometimes a minute or a moment at a time.
Sure.
But we do it by God's grace.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Gregg, if any of our listeners want to reach out to you, where can they get more information on your coaching services? We will make sure we include this in the description, but yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Just let them know.
Let me give you my website. I'm going to spell it. It's kind of a long word. It's beyondperseverance.com. That's my website, BEYOND, P as in Peter, ERSEV as in Victor, ERANCE.com. If you go to my website, you can read about my different coaching services. And then if you want to send me an email, it's on the website. There's a place to send me an email, but I'll give you my email now. It's Gregg, and that's 2 G's. Make sure you spell GREGG, at beyondperseverance.com. Gregg at beyondperseverance.com. That's my contact information.
All right. Well, thank you so much for giving your time and coming here to Plano and hanging out with us and having a conversation. I definitely want to thank you for joining us. And I also want to obviously thank our guests, our listeners, to spending the last couple minutes to listen to us out. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you very much, Gregg. And again, for our listeners, if you want to contact us, I'm not quite as good as I don't know if I'm ready to try spelling that out like that. But if you'd like to contact us, you can email us at bindwaves, BINDWAVES, at thebind, THEBIND.org. That's hard to do. Follow us on Instagram at bindwaves, and you can visit our website, thebind.org/bindwaves. And if you, like we mentioned a couple times, if you're interested in becoming a member or volunteering with us, you can also find those applications on the main website, thebind.org.
And of course, to all of our listeners, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on whatever your favorite platform is. And obviously, we're on YouTube, so just make sure to like us and continue following us.
And again, remember, you can find us every Thursday on all your favorite platforms. So until next time.
Until next time.
We hope you've enjoyed listening to Bind Waves and continue to support Bind and our nonprofit mission.
We support brain injury survivors as they reconnect into the life, the community, and their workplace.
And we couldn't do that without great listeners like you. We appreciate each and every one of you. Continue watching. Until next time.
Until next time.